We've had a great conference, and I've heard a lot about just the energy and the enthusiasm and the different ideas. And I wish that I could spend my time here talking about the future and the vision of where we're going from here. But frankly, recycling is facing a couple of very serious challenges. And I'm just going to my shorthand language. When I talk about recycling, I mean the world of issues that we work on. I mean source reduction, recycling, composting, producer responsibility, market development. So I just am going to use that term recycling, but no, that is my inclusive term to capture all of the work that we do. So I'm going to begin at the beginning. 29 years ago this summer, I began an internship at the offices of an obscure recycling advocacy organization. I had never heard of the organization a month prior to being interviewed for this internship. But within months of my start with Californians Against Waste, the media began reporting about a garbage barge meandering around the East Coast, looking for a space to dump its waste. That garbage barge became a symbol for the nation's growing over-disposal, over-consumption of material and waste. And that symbol spurred a surge in waste reduction and recycling policies and programs across the country. And despite California having some of the lowest disposal costs, some of the lowest tipping fees in the nation, California ultimately ended up leading the nation in terms of waste reduction and recycling policy, both in terms of the adoption of policies, but also in terms of actually achieving recycling results, waste reduction and recycling results. And it appears that we do lead the nation in terms of recycling at 47%. It appears that we lead the nation in terms of diversion from solid waste, depending on how you count that, in the 60s. We have more market development and producer responsibility policies in California than anywhere else in the nation. Our beverage container recycling law, despite its humble beginnings at the penny bottle bill, is today matches the recovery rates of any beverage container recycling law in the nation and has been determined by multiple studies to be the most cost-effective program of its kind in the nation. And we've demonstrated through these policies that recycling, when we go big with waste reduction and recycling policies, they can become a contributor to the economy, creating jobs, creating economic growth. And we've seen that in California, contributing more than $2 billion worth of value, creating more than 100,000 jobs here in California. In the 1990s, when I began doing presentations like this, I would often talk about bringing the opportunity to recycle, making the opportunity to recycle as convenient and as accessible as the opportunity to throw materials away. And I think that was the vision in the 1990s. That was what we were trying to achieve. And I think that we've gotten there. I think we've gotten there in terms of recycling opportunities everywhere you look. We've succeeded in embedding recycling in society. It's become part of the establishment. But with all of our accomplishments, all of our assets, all of our influence, I want to ask you, if this is a recycling revolution, why does it seem like we're losing the war? Why are we still consuming, collecting, and burying 3/4 of a ton of stuff for every man, woman, and child in California every year? Why is it that our post-AB 939 policy, our 75% recycling goal, doesn't require anyone to be accountable for anything? Why is it that the 3 decades of demonstrated success with our not insignificant patchwork of producer responsibility policies, why is it that we still can't pass a comprehensive producer responsibility policy in the state of California? Why is it that this spring and summer, with hundreds and hundreds of our core buyback recycling centers and processing facilities closing, why is it that we can't get the legislature and the governor to allow us to transfer a portion of our $250 million recycling fund surplus to support California recyclers, California processors who are going out of business because of the worst drop in scrap values that we've seen in 3 decades? Here's what I know. The recycling train that I got aboard 3 decades ago was a movement. It was a people-powered, it was cutting edge, it inspired passion. I think it inspired passion precisely because it was both on the cutting edge, but we could see the results. We could see tangible results. It was one of those environmental issues that as we move forward, maybe slightly different than air pollution and water pollution and conservation issues, you could see the results in real time. And I think that that captured people's imagination. They could see their accomplishments happening. But over the last decade, I fear that recycling has become disconnected from its activists and its activism. Disconnected from its source of energy, power, and passion. It's a cliche, but it's an apt one, is that I do think that we are in part a victim of our own success. Recycling bins and increasingly composting bins are everywhere. Every paper package that you pick up, every piece of paper, every sign, every piece of junk mail touts the fact that it's made from recycled paper. You turn over a plastic container, any plastic container, and you see this symbol, this message that's akin to our recycling symbol on the bottom of those containers, whether they're recyclable or not. Recycling appears to be everywhere, and yet it sometimes feels like it's nowhere. We sometimes have a difficult time distinguishing for the public and for policymakers the meaningful from the meaningless. As a consequence, we're losing battles that we should be winning. We're failing to build on the producer responsibility and market development gains that we made 2 decades ago. 2 decades, in 1989, this coalition, this community succeeded in getting the legislature and a Republican governor to tell newspaper publishers that they had to put recycled content in their newspapers. Try telling newspapers what they have to put in their newspaper. And yet, for the last several years, we have been unable to get just a 10% recycled content mandate in plastic beverage containers. We're failing to realize the potential, the potential of recycling as a driver of socioeconomic change, as a path to sustainability. And yet, packaging manufacturers are willing to do contortions in order to slap bogus labels on their products, extolling fake environmental virtues. We're failing to provide the public and policymakers with a vision of recycling's future that is discernible from the fleet of trucks that come through our neighborhoods every week and pick up the multicolored barrels from in front of our houses. Now, I'm not disparaging that infrastructure that we've all helped create. I mean, that is a point of victory. At the same time, I'm not ready to declare victory and go home. I'm not ready to say that we've achieved success, let's move on to the next issue. And I don't think, based on what I understand of the conversations and the discussions at this conference, I don't think you're there as well. So what's the problem? It's not lack of expertise. I mean, CRRA and CAW, we have more collective expertise and experience in our organizations today than we have at any point in our history. And frankly, we've added to the coalition organizations like the California Product Stewardship Council and the Container Recycling Institute, Heidi Sanborn and Susan Collins, and multiple other organizations that are working on these issues. We didn't have those in the 1980s. And it's not a lack of ideas. I am absolutely convinced that there is a storage unit somewhere near Loomis, California, that is packed to the rafters with rolls and rolls of paper with Gary Liss's handprints in terms of, writing out all the big ideas that we've been talking about for 25 years. I think the problem is that recycling is currently perceived has become part of the status quo, part of the establishment. What the public views as recycling is akin to a utility that we subscribe to rather than as environmental change, something that we have to constantly be pursuing and reinventing. In some respects, recycling in 2016 is the Hillary Clinton of this campaign cycle. We know it works. We know it's good for us. We know it'll get the job done. We know it is 1,000 times better than dump. Recycling is 1,000 times better than dumping. But the public and many of our environmental colleagues no longer see recycling as a cutting-edge issue. This is not something that they perceive as something we need to continue to pursue. They see it as something separate, in a separate silo, as we were just discussing, from other environmental issues. Something that, frankly, we've already accomplished and we should declare victory on. Recycling has gone from a cause that the public and many of us were drawn to as a passion, as a mission, to a utility that provides 90-gallon containers for recycling, real and wishful recycling, and a fleet of trucks to collect them. Recycling is perceived, even in our house, even in my household, as a weekly chore that I have to cajole the kids into doing. Aiden, my son Aiden, is in the back with my wife Nicole. So, Aiden, have you taken out the recycling? Aiden, have you fed the food waste to the chickens? Aiden, no, you can't put that milk carton in the recycling bin. It's not recyclable here in our town. So recycling appears to have lost its mojo. I want to tell you, I'm not done yet. I'm not ready to declare victory and move on. And given the buzz and energy at this conference, I don't think that you are either. Recycling has so much more to contribute in terms of pollution reduction and conservation, in terms of collecting and returning the organic fraction of our waste stream back into the soil, combating climate change, building sustainable, job-creating industry here in California that utilizes the material that we've been diverting for recycling. This community has a great vision, great ideas, and a proven track record of environmental success. But good ideas aren't enough. We need to build and reinvigorate the grassroots communities, the grassroots activism that brought us to this point. So here's the good news. The good news is that the universe has provided us with an opportunity. That opportunity to reinvigorate and rebuild a grassroots source of energy, power, and passion for our movement, to reassert our rightful place on the cutting edge of environmental policy in California. Just 90 days from now, 13 million California voters are going to go to the polls. And on the ballot, we're going to have the closest thing to a recycling issue that we've had since 1982 in Prop 11. Proposition 67, it's the last item on the ballot. And it's going to ask Californians if once and for all, are we ready to get rid of plastic grocery bags? Specifically, Prop 67 asks voters to affirm a statewide law that phases out single-use plastic grocery bags and requires stores to pass along the real cost of paper bags, the 10-cent cost of paper bags. Now, I understand that for some of you, phasing out plastic bags, it might seem small. It might just seem like a minor issue. We're on to bigger and better things. But I want you to understand that this is more than just the bag. It is not just about this one particular issue. It is about an opportunity to, number one, send a message to policymakers. Number two, it is a message to advance our agenda for the future. And it's also a matter of taking care of a battle that we started some 9 years ago. I want you to consider just some of these issues as they're related to this, where we've come from on this particular plastic bag issue. The single-use plastic bag is, in my view, it is the perfect poster child for the broader issue of unnecessary overpackaging and waste. It's a problem, the problem posed by the 10 billion plastic bags that we continue to generate personifies unnecessary, unrecyclable waste. And whereas some litter-prone products it's easy for the apologists to say, it's not a problem product, it's a behavior problem. That's not the case with plastic bags. Any of you that operate a solid waste facility, a landfill, a transfer station, you know that those plastic bags, because of their physical properties, because there's so many of them, they blow from trash cans, they blow out of the back of garbage cans, and they blow off the face of landfills. We don't need to sell voters on the facts, the problems of plastic bags. The polling demonstrates that the majority of the public already recognizes that these are problem products. They feel guilty about having to accept them. They hate it when they see them littered. And they're frustrated when the bags are overflowing in their drawers and their pantries and in their homes. And the effort to phase out plastic bags is at its core a comprehensible source reduction policy. This is something that people can actually understand. They understand that I go to the grocery store, I bring my own bag, I've reduced that source of waste. And I do believe that bringing those reusable bags to the grocery store is a gateway policy for us to advance other broader source reduction issues. Now, I also want to say that this organization owns this issue. This organization was there at the very beginning. In 9 years ago in San Francisco, Robert Haley, I saw Robert Haley here, Jack Macy, Emily Utter, and the folks at the San Francisco Department of the Environment, they passed the first bag ban in San Francisco. And today, quite literally today, in Oceanside, California, Colleen Foster, I don't know if she's here today or if she's down in Oceanside, but they're going to be the 151st city to pass a plastic bag ban in the state of California. This organization, the people in this room, you own this issue. This is also our chance to advance producer responsibility. Now, maybe some of you are thinking, well, plastic bag bans, it's not a solid waste policy, it's not producer responsibility. Bullshit. Banning a product, prohibiting the sale of the product, is the consequence of a failed commitment to producer responsibility. The plastic bag industry has failed in their commitment to producer responsibility. They're gone. It's time to push them out. So for CAW, for CRRA, for California Product Stewardship Council, for all of us in this room, our community of recycling advocates, of local recycling coordinators, of solid waste managers, we own this issue. We now have got to take it across the finish line. I want to give you a sense of what we're facing. You know this opposition. You've been facing this opposition in your communities. These guys spent $6 million to put this measure on the ballot. And another measure whose sole purpose is to confuse voters. Many of you will recall that they spent $3 million on lobbyists and campaign contributions from 2010 to 2014 to block our legislation. Many of you know that they hired lobbyists and PR consultants to change California's environmental education curriculum to say good things to our kids about plastic bags. You know that these are the same companies that financed legal challenges that used and abused California's Environmental Quality Act to try and block local plastic bag bans. This is the same industry that will do and say anything to protect $150 million worth of sales. So I expect them to spend $20 to $40 million to try and protect those sales during this election cycle. Historically speaking, this is one of those issues. So I don't want any of us to take this campaign for granted. This is one of those issues that, we'll start with a 10 to 12% lead in the polls, and that's about where we are. And then during the course of the campaign, the other side will spend their money on TV ads, and it'll start to chip away. And we end up on election day losing by 4 or 5 percentage points. It's happened with multiple issues. We can't let it happen on this issue. We've already said no to plastic bags in most of our communities. But we can't lose this election because of the message it's going to send to policymakers and the public that we can be beat on a policy that we worked our asses off for the last decade to try and pass. So I need everyone to be a part of this effort. In the midst of everything else that's going on during this chaotic election, we need to utilize all of our allies and assets in order to maximize direct communication with voters, and we need to use you. We need to use your trusted sources in your communities on these kinds of issues. And you can't assume that somebody else is going to be doing it. We do not have the resources to match them dollar for dollar on TV. What we need is for you to communicate with people in your communities as trusted sources talking about these issues. Those of you that have already passed plastic bag bans, it's a great time for you to talk about the success of those programs in your community. Those of you that operate landfills and transfer stations, it's time for you to be talking about the cost of plastic bags on your system. Despite all of our success with recycling policy, so this is just, despite all of our success, we've had a number of stalls in recent years. We're failing to advance policies that are necessary to realize the true potential of recycling. A source of that stall may be our own success, and because recycling has kind of become the establishment. Our vision and objectives in terms of recycling's future have become disconnected from our grassroots. We've got to reconnect. This campaign represents an opportunity for us to reconnect. We must reassert our place on the cutting edge of environmental policy. Plastic bags, they're a problem, but again, this is not just about the bags. This is about reinvigorating our movement. This is about getting back to why all of you got in this work in the first place. It's why I got in this work. So I need you all to join me for the next 90 days in this campaign. I need you to become part of this campaign. I need you to put in time personally with your organizations, with your local governments, and become part of this effort to reassert recycling as the cutting-edge grassroots environmental issue that we all know it is, that we all believe in, so that we can advance the next generation of recycling policies that we've all been talking about the last several days. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.